Hello World Wide Web, I'm Shado, the internet personality with the best hair. And no, this isn't the summer of Statham. As awesome as that might sound, remember, I go by the actual start of summer and not colloquialism. So technically summer hasn't started yet, Memorial Day or not. Anyway, this week we're taking a look at Death Race from 2008. A reboot of Death Race 2000, Death Race is less a remake and more a reimagining, with many obvious nods to the original work, but almost nothing to do with it storyline-wise, other than the fact that there happens to be a race which involves people dying quite a bit. That's about where the similarities end, though. In pre-production, it said that they were actually planning on doing something a lot closer to what the original was like, but then they realized that they were going way over budget, so they nixed that idea. Even though they still had Corman on board, I think they could have asked him a little bit of how they could have done that. I'm pretty sure he could help. While Death Race 2000 was a cross-country journey following 5 campy character racers in gaudy over-the-top vehicles, and Death Race is about 10 racers going in a circle in a small prison island. Now, the racers dying is the main draw in Death Race, whereas in Death Race 2000, it was about killing pedestrians, and the deaths of the racers was considered shocking and unfortunate. One thing they both have is strong leads, though, as this one gives us Jason Statham, coming right off of his success in the Transporter series, driving cars and killing people. It's what he does. So, anyway, let's take a look at Death Race, and see if it holds up the spirit of the original without any of the original characters' story, or the setting, or the plot. The movie opens up with some text-based exposition that in the mystical future year of 2012, the unthinkable happens, an economic collapse! Fancy words out of a movie from 2008. The resulting unemployment and financial instability results in every single prison in the country turning into for-profit prisons. This, combined with a Smash TV-esque combination of the public's love of both violence and reality TV, culminates in the creation of the most popular pay-per-view spectacular the world has ever seen, Death Race. This brings us up to speed just in time to jump into a death race in progress, where 2 racers face off.
Oil! Ow! Smoke!
Finished!
Give me the napalm!
Nothing works!
Unfortunately for our mysterious masked racer, Frankenstein voiced by David Carradine, all of his defensive weapons have suddenly just stopped working. He tells his navigator, Case, played by Natalie Martinez, to drop the tombstone. The tombstone being their big-ass rear armor plate that protects the ridiculously oversized gas tank. She's obviously concerned dropping the armor will mean they'll blow the fuck up, but he's insistent. While this move buys them some time, it's not long before their pursuer is ready to take them out, and Frankenstein's refusal to drop back to safety is enough for Case to say, fuck this, and get out of there. But hey, he made it! Dead, but it worked an iron will. But this was just to grab our attention quickly, and give us a nice cameo for David Carradine. However, it's not really the start of our story. That's our main man Jason Statham, playing Jensen Ames, who is being laid off from his job. After being royally fucked on his final payment, a SWAT team shows up to help incite a riot. Which actually matters even less for the plot. It establishes that Statham's a badass in a show-don't-tell manner, which is nice and all, but it actually has abso-fucking-lutely nothing to do with what gets him into the death race. Despite all of these problems, he makes it home just fine, even telling his wife, who isn't upset at all about him losing his job. As a matter of fact, she's still just happy to be so in love with him, and they're going to raise a daughter together, and everything will be wonderful. How long until she dies?
Let's go crazy.
Less than 2 minutes after she appears on screen. There might be a new record here. Of course, she isn't just killed, but the mysterious masked man takes the time to frame Statham for the crime, with the police showing up incredibly fast to take him away. Convicted so fast for the murder of his wife we don't even see the trial, this instead introduces the overly important guard who keeps showing up everywhere, Jason Clarke, who plays Ulrich. The Ted Cruz-looking motherfucker. A few more characters are also introduced during this time, but the important part comes when Ames is trying to eat one day, and Max Ryan appears on the scene. You know, Denoir, the only enjoyable character from the Seagal movie The Foreigner. Here he plays Pachenko, leader of the Brotherhood, who pretty much stands in as the Nazis this time around. Point is, words are exchanged, but they do come to an understanding. that understanding being that they want to kill each other, but unfortunately can't really do this while they're surrounded by guards. This stunt does bring him to the attention of the warden, Hennessy, played by Joan Allen. She's deeply concerned for our poor protagonist because he's on the bad side of some very bad people who just might kill him in short order. Oh, if only he didn't have a life sentence. But you know, there's a fantastic deal to be made if he helps her out with a small problem.
Poor Frank died on an operating table not long after his last race. Anyone can wear the mask, but not just anyone can drive the car.
It also just so happens that Jensen Ames was a kick-ass racer back in the day. They just forgot to ever establish this while they were busy establishing how much ass he knew how to kick. Oops. As luck would have it, Frankenstein won 4 races, and the rules state you need to win 5 in order to earn your freedom. Or he could refuse and just be put in solitary confinement for the remainder of his life sentence.
I'm sure you'll find solitary preferable to what Mr. Pachenko and his friends have in mind for you.
I hear they're planning a big prison party to screen the new Ghostbusters movie. Fine, I'll do the damn race. With that, she brings him down to the garage where we meet up with the rest of the crew. Again. I mean, they were in the cafeteria too. The point is we see Fred Kohler playing the stuttering savant Lists, Jacob Vargas as Gunner, who is a mechanic, and never so much as handles a gun, and the all-important Coach, played by Ian McShane. You know, Al Swearingen from Deadwood.
The inmates are Jensen Ames' new grease monkey.
Nobody will know you're Frank except us on the team and a handful of the guards. Nobody will talk.
Absolutely no one will find out that you're Frankenstein because nobody will say anything. Okay? More importantly, they must give a rundown of Frankenstein's car and all the little doohickeys attached inside, outside, front, and back.
And in the rear, a 6-inch solid steel shield we call the Tombstone.
Nice defense. What do you got to counterbalance the weight? Nothing? Dear God, man, do you know anything about physics?
What's that? Most important part of the car.
Cigarette lighter, so silly. So now you know they're going to use it in some important combat scenario, because otherwise they wouldn't have spent so long establishing the thing existed. Coach explains the rules of the 3-stage race simply enough. First 2 stages are simply elimination rounds, so your only goal is to survive them. The last 30% of Death Race is actually a race where you must reach the goal before your competition. Also, everyone is assigned a female navigator for shits and giggles.
Yeah, Machine Gun Joe's the only one that has male navigators, because he's gay.
Actually, it's because he goes through them so fast. The audience gets squeamish.
Yeah, he goes through them, through their ass.
Yeah, there are holdovers and nods to the original Death Race 2000, such as the Navigators, who you don't have sex with in this movie, even though they did in Death Race 2000. But they also have Machine Gun Joe, who is also not a mobster stereotype played by Sylvester Stallone. This time it's Tyrese Gibson, a big burly black guy with a big-ass truck, a bad attitude, and religious faith. He also was the guy to kill Frankenstein in the opening, though he doesn't quite realize that just yet.
You tell Frank when you see him. This race is between me and him.
I'm just wondering what happens if he dies in the next race and sees Frank in the afterlife. And that's going to be an awkward conversation. Before long, it's already time for stage 1 of the race, which means it's time for the Navigators to be bussed in from the women's penitentiary to provide some TNA for the viewers at home.
Got what you want, got what you need, got what you want, get it from me, got what you want,
How the hell they managed to slow down time with their hair swishes, though? I gotta learn that. One last thing before the race starts, though. They have to establish that Frankenstein's car has tinted bulletproof glass, so it doesn't matter if he wears the mask or not.
How the hell is he driving that thing?
Making for a considerably less dramatic reveal for his navigator. Then again, she also already knew Frank died, so no bother. It's time for the race to begin. Again, presented like an actual television event, albeit considerably more modernized than Death Race 2000, with disembodied narrators instead of gigantic collars and pink sunglasses.
A full-on fight to the death, featuring 4-time winner Frankenstein.
12 million hits on his angle alone. He hasn't even started the engine.
I know YouTube channels that do better. And then again, Death Race charges viewers $100 per stage, so maybe it's not a fair comparison. Point is, after they cover a few more rules, like weapons only being activated via Mario Kart pickups that don't appear until lap 2 of 3, the race is underway. While I think they do go a little overboard on the super zoom-in and shaky cam at times, overall this does have a very visceral feel to it. Because of the emphasis on mounted weapons and vehicle-to-vehicle combat, though, it comes off much less like Death Race 2000 and much more like Twisted Metal. Twisted Metal Black, to be specific, if we're going to talk about the incredibly muted colors of this movie. Also, it's not just sword and shield bonus pickups at work here. There's also death heads, which pop up traps in the road to kill the ever-loving fuck out of the racers. The chaos is enough to take out lots of characters very quickly, such as our good friend Robert Lasardo, who plays Grim, aka Reaper, though he does survive the crash.
Fucking Reaper, baby. Can't kill me. Can burn me? You can fucking shoot me, but you just can't motherfucking kill me!
You also don't get points for running people over either, though it does improve your chances of winning the race. And it cuts down on the amount of people trying to kill you, so I guess that works. The race continues almost like normal, up until lap 3, where suddenly all of Frankenstein's defensive weapons just happen to not work. However, this time it's Jason Statham at the wheel, so they rip the napalm tank out, launch that bitch with a passenger eject seat, and use the all-important conveniently established cigarette lighter.
Merry Christmas, asshole!
Oh, shit!
A clever means to utilize weaponry despite being sabotaged. Until they reveal this, anyway. After the race is done, Frankenstein coming in dead last but at least not dead, the mechanics try and figure out why none of the defensive weapons worked.
Coach! What? Look at this. All sprays work fine.
Well, I'll be damned.
It turns out the Navigator was merely pretending that they didn't work. And then put herself in the line of fire in order to pull off that stunt that Statham came up with, instead of just not, because consistency is hard. That revelation doesn't bother Ames quite as much as combined with all of the other extremely obvious hints. He's already figured out that him being framed for the murder of his wife is far too convenient for Hennessy's profit margins, and she obviously will never let him win the race, so screw playing her game. Problem is, she was one step ahead of him, and while she did send a guy to kill his wife, his daughter was merely kidnapped and placed under the care of a new family. Therefore, he's going to do what she tells him to do, otherwise his daughter might wind up having some bad things befalling her as well.
You wanted a monster? Well, you've got one.
Honestly, I just wanted a caffeinated beverage, but I guess a super pissed off Jason Statham will wake you up in the morning just as well. While he may be forced to take the mantle of Frankenstein to complete the race, at least so long as he survives, that doesn't mean that Jensen can't work out a few problems on his own, such as the fact that he's already figured out that Pachenko was the very man who was there on the night that his wife was murdered, so he's just going to fucking kill the man. Except he gets ganged up on very quickly and finds out that while Pachenko fully admits to killing his wife, he also doesn't give a damn about waiting for the race to finish Ames off.
I'm gonna take your head.
Very sorry to interrupt, but I seem to have misplaced my pen. This distraction is all that Statham needs to break free of his chains and kick all the asses. Cornered, Pachenko tries to bargain with the man, pointing out that it wasn't just him that night, as Hennessy sent guard Ted Cruz out there as well. This doesn't prevent Jensen from finishing him off. This does.
Now, boys. Let's save that for the track, huh?
How small is this fucking prison anyway? I know it's on an island, but it's gotta be pretty damn tiny if the only guard who ever shows up to everything is Ted motherfucking Cruz. Despite being forced into this position, once the race starts, it's not like the higher-ups have direct control over Jensen, so he drives extra shitty, so he can have a chance to chat with Case a bit about why she lied about the defensive weapons. Of course, it all comes back to Hennessy, who's been trying to keep Frankenstein in the race so the ratings will stay sky high.
Trying to set you back.
Son, I'm not supposed to win either. Just make it exciting.
The fuck does she think I am? An NPC? I hate NPCs! With them on the same page, he opts to not crack her skull by launching the seat while still in the tunnel, and move on to the next person he wants to kill, namely Pachenko. Thus, after ignoring his navigator's advice and pulling off some physics-defying anime-style racing maneuvers to take the man out of the race, he ignores the rules of racing just to go the fuck back there, get out of his car, and finish the job.
Anything Hennessy. I know. She's next.
Well, that's foreboding and all, but she's not next. And clearly there are plenty of other people on the track that need to die first. Not Frankenstein, though, as keeping him in the race requires keeping him alive, so Hennessy disables weapon pickups right before Machine Gun Joe can grab it, which doesn't bode well for his navigator.
Man, get the fuck out of my car! What? I said get the fuck out of my car!
I have to commend the movie. For a film that focuses on vehicular combat, they don't slouch when it comes to making damage to bodies really feel shocking and meaty. There's going to be a fuck ton of damage to vehicles coming up, though, as Hennessy unleashes the dreadnought upon the unsuspecting prisoners. This Mad Max monstrosity rides out into the track and immediately starts killing people left and right. I get they're going for ratings, but geez, ladies, hard to have an exciting final act when every player's fucking dead. Very quickly, the contestants are whittled down to Frankenstein and Machine Gun Joe, at which point Jensen calls Joe over the radio for Joe and him to put aside their differences for a second and work together to take down the tanker. But all things considered, the damn thing was heading straight for the death head anyway. I guess guards are just lousy at this race. At the end of the race, Frankenstein and Machine Gun Joe come out as the only survivors, which again I have to point out means Hennessy would have to not kill either of them in order for the third stage to even happen, but oh well. The point is the radio call has got the gears in Joe's head turning.
Got this feeling that you and Frank are close. Real close. That weird accent. You even kind of sound like...
Well, Frankenstein is a European name. It's a small world, after all. So Joe pretty much knows by now, but they don't come out and say it, so instead we hop over to Hennessy and Ted Cruz to find out the new plan. As they realize they can't keep Jensen under control, even with his daughter held hostage, Hennessy decides they should just kill him and find another Frankenstein, so Cruz plants a bomb in his car. Like, on the surface, extremely obviously. Of course, they're not the only ones making modifications in preparation for the final show.
Ghana, lists. Will Hennessy's inspectors care if we had a half-gallon reserve tank?
Another half-gallon? You got a fuel tank that holds 35 gallons.
Even if you only got a half mile per gallon, how the fuck do you need that much? We're coming up on the climax, so it all makes sense soon. First things first, though, Ames barges into Joe's workspace to have an important conversation.
I think you and Frank should have a little talk.
Off-screen. Wouldn't want the movie spoiling itself now, would you? We do get a few pre-race deals, though, with Hennessy telling Statham that she's fine with him winning. See, she has for his release papers signed and ready to go. But, hell, he's probably a shit father anyway and should just stick around and do the death races so his daughter can have a much better life without him. She's evidently been making offers to several people before the race.
So Hennessy tells me if you're gonna win, I'm supposed to stop you.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Which makes for an interesting setup. Everyone is just kind of continuing on like they normally would, but also is not a single person who doesn't have some kind of secondary goal or some kind of subplot brought up and is just kind of weaseling its way in and will be unfolded as the events continue. The first one, of course, being Hennessy, who, being in control of the Sword and Shield beacons, turns them off before Jensen can get them, and back on again in time for Machine Gun Joe to power up his own offensive and defensive abilities. This brings up a situation very similar to the opening, where Joe tears apart the rear armor to the point where the bullets are nearly passing through, so Ames decides it's time to drop the tombstone. Which does not smash into Joe this time, but just leaves Jensen's guy exposed! Oh, how indecent! Oh, no! Bad mental images! Oh, God, I've been playing too much Panzer models. Although they could easily fire a rocket into the exposed tank and take Frankenstein out, Joe decides to bide his time and put on a good show, toying with the man instead. That is, up until they reach a critical turn, where he makes his move.
What just happened?
Much like the fight with the dreadnought, the two guys are actually working together and just bash through the weak point in the track to drive the fuck out straight to the bridge out of there. With this realization, Hennessy calls to immediately cut the television feed, canceling the rest of Death Race, and uses her handy-dandy planted explosive to deal with the escape attempt herself.
Somebody's mad right now.
Nobody fucks with my car.
To be fair, Ted did plant the thing in an extremely fucking obvious location. It would have been less conspicuous to just throw it into the back seat. The escape attempt doesn't do them much good if the huge mob of guards chasing them down takes them out, though. So... we find out why a half-gallon reserve tank was part of the plan. Though, if it would work, that would mean that the car would have to have enough miles per gallon to mean that it wouldn't really need anything remotely close to a 35-gallon main tank, but... At this point, Joe and Frankenstein split up, and the choppers continue chasing after Frankenstein. This gives Jensen the chance to jump into the shadows, escaping into the night, riding a train to freedom with Joe, while Case pays homage to the original movie, dressing up in Frankenstein's clothes to throw off the police long enough for the guys to escape. So they made it out, but Hennessy is still rich as fuck, and receiving gifts for the best damn death race yet. It's almost like she won.
I always win.
I love this game.
Yeah, nothing like a grand prize of a care package from Michael Bay. Therefore, happy ending! Jensen and Joe escape the prison and have started a new life south of the border. And Statham has tracked down the people who had his daughter and kidnapped her back. Of course, as luck would have it, Case is also free. Funny thing, Hennessy had her release papers signed and ready before the race. Sure, she didn't make sure Frankenstein lost, but it's not like the wardens are around to argue the deal anymore. No shit movie? Anyway, that was Death Race. And although I'm pretty sure it's not going to have the same kind of legacy that Death Race 2000 did, that's not to say it's a bad movie. For starters, I am quite a fan of Jason Statham. Just putting it out there because it does mean my opinion is biased from at least that standpoint. Aside from that, I think that Death Race does a relatively good job of doing a remake in the same vein as things like The Fly, where the concept is taken and done up in a new, more modern way. In many ways, though, the movies couldn't be more different from each other. I keep coming back to the wacky characters and bright colors from Death Race 2000 versus the grim, dark, overly gritty presentation of Death Race. That's what I think hurt Death Race in the long run. It's hard to have a standout legacy when you're yet another dark and gritty movie out of the mid-2000s. Still, there are other ways it pays homage to the original, and some of them I feel worked better this time around. The massive twists and secret plans by the end were similar to the crossing plots from Death Race 2000, but while in the original it was downright ridiculous, here it works out in a mostly believable manner. Mostly. At the end of the day, Death Race took the spirit of extreme racing with ultra-violence and revved it up with a big-ass budget and an excellent cast. The new direction came at the cost of some of the old campy charm, but for fans of visceral action who can take an extreme close-up shaky camera too, Death Race still delivers on the entertainment factor, coming in at 4 useless navigators out of 5. And I know there are 2 more movies in the reboot series, and I do want to eventually get to them, but the time of the year, right now, the schedule's really packed, so I can't. No, not yet. And I am curious how they go, because this one seemed to end pretty definitively. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I've been Shado. And remember, if you're an action movie star, and you got a family, never bring them up under any circumstances!
you get scared, motherfucker? Kill me!
Although he could easily fire a rocket into the exposed tank and take... What? Did someone say something?
No.
Ah. Am I hearing voices again?
Probably.
Ah. Did they show up on camera?
No.
Okay, good.